Hi, boss. I'm late. It's 8:30. I'm late.
Your mom's coming tonight? Doesn't she have a
yeah.
home of her own?
Oh, honey, it's just for 2 weeks.
Yeah, but...
Try to be...
You can't be flat. This isn't happening to me. I don't... Honey!
Some days, stress seems to hit you between the eyes before you even get out of bed. And then it dogs your heels all the way to work. And once at work, there's even more stress just waiting to jump you at the first opportunity. Well, today, we're going to talk about stress in your dealership and in your life. I'm going to try and teach you how to beat stress at its own game. If you pay attention, you'll learn how to recognize stress, how to prepare yourself for stress, and how to deal with stress when it happens. In short, how to be a better stress manager. The first step in dealing with stress is learning to recognize it for what it is. And to do that, we might often have to realize that things are not quite what they seem. Sometimes, for example, your parts job might seem just too overwhelming. I mean, parts jobs are just too big for a mere mortal to understand and cope with. But there is a way to deal with stress problems, no matter how big they seem at the time. A way to reach the lofty heights of stress management without having to climb the walls to get there. Many people don't even recognize stress until it's too late. Look around you. Well, if you pay attention, you'll find dozens, even hundreds of stress points in every single working day in parts. Things like angry customers, lost profits, damaged parts, having to work with jerks, wrong parts, emergency parts, hostile technicians, lost parts, retail customers, unavailable parts, the wrong part in the right box, part supersessions, wrong part names, and on and on and on. But while there may be hundreds of stress points, there's still only one point at which you can resist stress. And that point is you. You can control stress if you learn how. It might surprise you, but for most of us, managing stress is not something we just do naturally. It's a learned skill that we have to work up to. And it's something that everybody needs to work up to, because when stress starts getting out of hand, it's too easily spread from person to person, or worse, from employee to customer. Your parts manager probably has the most stress. His lot is typical of people in middle management. He's caught between the customer and the dealership management, between the service department and his department, between profit and loss. And then there's the retail counter person who's trying to get some accurate information from a customer who only knows that he drives a Buick. He doesn't know the make, he doesn't know the model, he doesn't know the color, he doesn't know the engine, and heaven forbid he would know any of the options he has on his GM car or truck. And how about those counter people who are trying to work with the technicians? Trying to get for Mr. Goodwrench the part that he needs so he can get his car out today. Or the wholesale salesperson, trying to deal over the telephone and get some pretty precise information from a bump shop operator across town who isn't real familiar with GM parts. And then there's the delivery driver, on his route to the wholesale customers and having to deal with everybody from Mr. Nice Guy to Mr. Obnoxious. As you can see, there's plenty of stress to go around in a parts operation. Stress that triggers within us the classic fight or flight response. And it's how well you deal with this stress response on your job and in your life that can determine both your happiness and your success. It's the same basic reaction that nature gave us years ago when our prehistoric ancestors were trying to deal with a dinosaur. They either threw a spear at him or they ran like the Dickens. They either fight or they flight. The only problem is this fight or flight response doesn't work real well in modern times. I mean, if you punch the next customer in the nose or you walk away from him the next time he's yelling at you, well, you're not going to have a customer or even a job for too long. But the thing that triggers within us this little stress response, our lower brain here back in the hypothalamic area, you see, it don't know from modern times. All it knows is it gets a message from the higher brain saying, hey, I got some trouble here. And wham, that lower brain kicks in and triggers simultaneously a whole series of events. We get a good shot of adrenaline to get the heart beating faster and the blood pressure up so we can get blood to our muscles and our lungs. We get a shot of hormones in addition to speed up the metabolism and a shot of sugar to make sure that it's burned in our working muscles. That digestive tract shuts down. Oh, we need the blood supply now in our lungs and in our muscles. Our lungs dilate to the maximum so they can get oxygen to the muscles, and the breathing itself speeds up. Our pancreas squeezes out a good slush of red blood cells so we can get even more oxygen to the muscles and thickening our blood at the same time. We get pale, sweaty kind of skin as the blood is diverted to these muscles and to the lungs. And in short, we begin to feel stress. Now, in and of itself, this stress response isn't all bad. As a matter of fact, it can even be helpful if we're trying to deal, for example, with a real danger. But even if there's actually no real danger present, it still can help us keep at peak performance, keep us sharp, like a professional athlete. Unfortunately, there is a dangerous side to this stress response as well. If it starts kicking in too often or staying on for too long, we can begin to experience some pretty nasty side effects, both physical and emotional. A permanent state of hypertension. Bad news. Physically, people who are experiencing prolonged kinds of stress often complain about headaches, almost migraine. A lot of tension-related complaints in the neck or the shoulders. They develop nervous tics or habits, perhaps. They can't eat, they can't sleep, or they sleep all the time and eat too much. Skin irritations, tightness in the chest, heartburn, sweaty palms, dry mouth, and on and on and on. On the emotional side, people enduring some prolonged kinds of stress often speak of feeling lethargic, just don't have any zip anymore. They might feel angry or anxious or depressed or touchy. Excuse me, what's bugging him today? They might have trouble concentrating or getting things done or staying organized. And if it gets bad enough, they might begin to withdraw, begin to play around with alcohol or drugs. They might start being absent from work more often and generally feel like they're losing control. Now, all of these little stress symptoms should be kind of an early warning system for us. Little lights going off in our brain saying, yoo-hoo, something's going on here. Perhaps we need to start doing something. But too often, what people try to do is to manage their stress by trying to manage their stressors. It's my stupid boss. It's those ignorant customers. It's this lousy computer. It's the GM warehouse. That's what's causing all my stress. That's what needs to change. Well, yes, there's no doubt that all of those things produce for us some stressors. On the other hand, there are also the things that we have no control over. So here's a PartsMart tip. The next time you find yourself trying to deal with things that you have no control over, remember the Serenity Prayer. The Serenity Prayer simply says, grant me the serenity to accept those things that I can't change. Grant me the courage to change those things that I can change. And grant me the wisdom to know the difference. There are things that we can change and things that we should change in order to prepare ourselves for stress, to make ourselves more stress resistant, both physically and emotionally. Things like keeping everything in perspective. Do you ever have one of those times when you begin to think that everything is just awful and terrible around you? Problems so huge you'll never be able to control them? Well, at that point, I urge you to give yourself what's called the awfulness test. Try to imagine for yourself, for example, what truly awful is. Make up a scale, for example, say from 1 to 100 of awfulness. Now, if you think about it, probably like 99 on that awfulness scale would be being tortured to death slowly. It's not 100, you see, because they could always do it slower. But once you have decided then that being tortured to death slowly is 99 on your awfulness scale, then go back and rank where your current hassle falls. And you probably find it's only a 27. It's really not that awful. You see, what happens when we put things into the 99 category all the time is that they seem too overwhelming, much too overburdening to deal with. Can't deal with a 99, but I can deal with a 27. So the next time that you feel yourself getting into those situations where you begin to feel more and more that the current problem you're going through is just too overwhelming, think to yourself, compared to being tortured to death slowly, where does this fall? And you'll probably find out it's not that awful. And now let's talk a little bit about stress and other people. No doubt about it, other people frequently provide plenty of stress points for us throughout our day. Whether we're trying to deal with a customer, our coworkers, our boss, stress is often caused from other people. And when we're in a position where we're constantly working and dealing with other people, I think we need to adopt a bit of an attitude that I call detached concern. And by detached concern, what I mean is that all we need do with these other people is simply learn to appreciate them. And that's it. All you have to do is simply understand what they're trying to communicate, and that's it. You don't have to like them. You don't have to agree with them. All you need to do is simply learn to appreciate them. It's like me and modern art. I hate modern art. Most of it to me is junk and it gives me a headache. But I can appreciate modern art. I look at a piece and I'll say, gee, someone probably worked very hard on that. A couple nice colors in there. It's framed well. I'd never buy it. I don't want to see it in my house. But I can appreciate it. It's nice. Well, to me, that's all we need to do when we deal with other people as well, too, is simply learn to appreciate them. There's no need to be a friend and a pal and a buddy to everybody you come in contact with. I mean, if they could get what they needed from their friends, their pals, and their buddies, they probably wouldn't need you. What they don't need is a friend. What they need is someone who can be a little objective, a little detached with the concern. All too often what I see from people when they first start out is the concern side. Oh, they all begin running around going, "Hi there, how can I help you?" And after they've been around the block a few times, honey, all you see is the detached side. They sit picking their fingernails going, "Yeah, what do you want?" Somewhere in the middle is what I'm talking about. There's the ability to have that concern, but there's also the ability to maintain some detachment. And that's another PartsMart tip. People often feel stress as well when they feel like they're being forced to be something that they're not, forced to wear a little emotional uniform on that job. They're forced to be, for example, in their opinion, the technical person, or the disciplinarian, or the smiley helper. And yet on the inside, they don't feel all that technical or smiley helper, but they think that's what's expected of me. And on goes some little emotional uniform, and they spend so much time trying to make believe they're something that they're not, rather than just do their job. Well, what I'm saying to you is I think the best tool you have on your job is not some little handy-dandy software program, nor is it some little mechanical marvel. The best tool you have on your job is you. So use it. Allow yourself to be yourself. If you're a clown, be a clown. If you're a grouch, be a grouch. If you're a jerk, well, be a jerk. But be a good jerk. Be a genuine jerk. Now, that doesn't mean we have license to be rude to people or obnoxious or insubordinate, But what it does mean is that we need to allow ourselves to be ourselves within the parameters that are there of good professional relationships, good customer relationships, good human relationships. Then we can concentrate on doing our job instead of having to concentrate on wearing a uniform. It makes it a lot easier, and it makes it a lot more fun. And excuse me for being naive, but I kind of think doing your job should be fun. That's another PartsMart tip. We can also help ourselves deal with stress by learning to become more assertive. I think people often feel stress when they feel that these other people keep trying to make them do things that they don't want to do, or making them do it in a way they don't want to do it. By learning to be more assertive, I think we can eliminate some of this stress. What I suggest is that we learn to ask people, what is it that you want me to do? By doing that, you see, you give yourself a chance to be back in control. When the person tells you what it is they would like to see you do, you can say, sure, that's something I could do. Or you can say, forget it, go rub a lamp. But see, now you're back in control. By being more assertive, we can learn to be more in control and consequently give ourselves a better perspective over stress. And now I'd like to talk to you about a study done which tried to compare people who dealt well with stress versus those who didn't deal so well. What was found is that the people who coped well with stress had a number of characteristics, 3 to be specific: a sense of commitment, a sense of control, and a sense of challenge. Let's take the first, commitment. People who have a sense of commitment are the people who know themselves. They know what makes them tick. They can talk about their values, what they think is important, things they'd like to accomplish. They know themselves well. But there's another side. They also know that what they're doing in their life, how they're going about doing their thing, is congruent with what they believe in. The people who don't have a sense of commitment are the people who feel like they believe one thing but are doing another. The people who walk around going, I don't know. I came here 10 years ago, things were fine, but now, gee, everything's changed. I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm just kind of hanging in there the best that I can. Those people didn't survive too well. The second magic ingredient seemed to be a sense of control. People who made it had a perception that they had some control over what was happening. The people who didn't fare so well were the people who felt they had no control over what was going on. Everything was just happening to them. What was interesting is often these people worked side by side. One person having a perception of control and doing very well, the other having a perception of no control and not doing so well. And the third characteristic of the people who survived is a sense of challenge. Oh, the people who make it are the people who like to give things a shot once in a while, like to try new things, like to look for problems ahead of time. Ooh, the people who have no sense of challenge never look for problems. Oh, God forbid, if we talk about it, it might happen. Forget it, I see nothing, just kind of whistle through the graveyard. Oh, they never change anything. I got all I can do keeping this ship floating the way it is. Maybe with the change, you're going to blow me out of the water. We're just going to maintain, for goodness sake. That lack of sense of challenge contributed to them not faring as well either. So I think if we can learn to develop within ourselves a sense of commitment to ourselves and what we're doing, a perspective of control, even if we can't control everything, there are parts we can control, and a sense of vigorousness and challenge, we give ourselves a better shot at managing stress. Another great way to help you reduce stress is to develop for yourself a social/professional support group. A social professional support group is a group of people, large or small, that will meet for you 3 important criteria. First, they're people who do a similar thing as you. Perhaps not exactly the same, but at least they're in a similar enough kind of position where they know what you're talking about. You're on the same wavelength. You can appreciate one another. Second, however, these are also the kind of people that you don't feel competitive with. I mean, you're not trying to look good for them, and they're not trying to look good for you. They're the kind of people that you trust enough to let your hair down with a little. And third, and probably most important, these are also the kind of people who are willing to give you some good constructive feedback. Be it a pat on the back if that's what it takes, or a kick in the back if that's what it takes. But they are not going to be people who are just going to sit there and listen to you gripe. Gripe sessions are the worst thing we can do for stress. People walk out of a gripe session feeling worse than when they came in. Gee, I didn't realize all that stuff was going on around here. It's pretty bad. And a good little social professional support group won't let that come down. If you gripe to them about the same old thing, they're going to say, hey, wait a minute. We told you could try this or try that. Put up or shut up. And I'm not talking about a big deal here either. You don't need to have a treasurer or a secretary or a president for one of these. I'm talking a couple people that you can brown bag lunch with, someone you can have a cup of coffee with, someone you can call on the phone, someone who does a similar thing so they know what you're talking about, somebody you don't feel competitive with, and someone who can give you some good constructive feedback. Use them for a little stress management. But stress is more than just emotional. It also has a physical side to it. And so there are a number of things that we can begin to do physically to cope with stress as well. On the physical side, we can begin to recognize the physical-mental connection. It's very hard to feel good mentally when you feel rotten physically. And vice versa, it's hard to feel good physically when you feel rotten mentally. The connection's really there. Did you ever have one of those days, for example, when you say to yourself, this is it. I think I'm just going to lock myself in the bathroom and macrame my hair. Well, that may not be such a bad idea. The trick is, we need to find an acceptable way to lose it once in a while. And one way that works especially well is a good, violent physical exercise. Something that will allow us to lose it. We can deal with all those picky little things that happened all day long, all the people who bugged us and got under our skin. In one fell swoop, take them all on. But second, we need to do it until we're exhausted, really tired. Because that'll do the same thing for you as a vacation. Think, why do we get vacations? I think vacations are designed primarily to kind of allow people to unwind, get some rest, come back ready to go. And a good violent physical exercise does the same thing. It forces you to unwind very quickly. You're so pooped you guarantee yourself a good night's sleep and come back roaring to go. Eventually you might not have to go quite so wild just to deal with a little bit of stress. You won't need a machine gun just to kill your mosquito. But initially, a great way to deal with things mentally is to also deal with them physically. But we also need to pay attention to other physical factors. Physical factors like how much we eat, how much we drink, how much we smoke. For those factors also impact our stress resistance. One classic way people have used to cope with stress, for example, is to take a break at work. Have a cup of coffee, a cigarette, a donut. Great. Remember when we talked about the physical impact of stress? With our lungs the most dilated, the worst thing we can do is give them a cigarette right now. Oh, and with all that adrenaline and insulin and sugar in our system, just what they need is more stimulation from caffeine and nicotine. And as for the donut, remember, our digestive system is shut down. That's why people come back from a break sometimes wound up even tighter than when they left. And finally, another great way to manage stress is to learn how to relax. And relaxation is a skill. It's something we have to learn how to do. Relaxation actually is the ability for us to just do nothing and not feel guilty. And that's the trick. But it's a trick that we need to learn. If you'd like to do something when you relax, you can do something. But then you need to remember that the reason you're doing it is to relax. You don't do it to get it done. You don't do it because you're supposed to. You don't do it because you want to get better at it. You do it because you just feel like doing it. You can use more subtle ways to relax. For example, practice some deep muscle relaxation. To do this, all you need to do is get yourself in a comfortable position and then alternately practice tensing and relaxing the major muscle groups. Start with your feet, for example, and work your way up through your calves, your thighs, your stomach, your shoulders. If you'd like more information, there's more about it in the study guide that accompanies this training module. But if you learn to practice this technique 2 or 3 times during a stress-filled day, I think you'll find it'll be a help. However you do it, relaxation, remember, is a skill. And therefore, like any other skill, it takes practice. And we need to practice relaxing a half hour every day. Yeah, I know. Half hour a day? Where am I supposed to find a half hour a day? Well, it's up to you. You decide. You can pay now with learning some stress management techniques, or you can pay later by suffering bad health and bad job performance. If it's important enough for you, you'll find the half hour it takes to help yourself learn to relax. Now, so far, we've talked about some ideas that can help you manage stress in the long term. But what about stress right here at work, right on the job? What about when we're having trouble dealing with that service technician or the customer or Mr. Obnoxious? Then what do we do? One on-the-spot stress tool is mental imaging. Just close your eyes, even for a few seconds, and try to imagine yourself in Hawaii or anywhere else where you can feel at ease or relaxed. Or even remember a favorite time you had on your last vacation, something cute your child may have done, or even a funny moment in a movie. By imagining yourself somewhere calm and serene, or by remembering a time that was really relaxing and fun, you can emotionally interrupt your stress reaction and feel a little more relaxed. And another way we can deal with stress as it's happening is to deal with what I call the stinking thinking circle. What I mean by a stinking thinking circle is that when we're in a stressful situation, we tend to think about all the things that are making us stressed. And the more we think about, the more stressed we feel. The more stressed we feel, the more we think, and round we go in a little stinking thinking circle. What we need to do is anything, literally anything that'll interrupt this little stinking thinking circle. A major event or a minor event. For example, we could use some of the muscle relaxation techniques we just talked about. You could change physical positions or take a deep breath. But it needs to be the right kind of deep breath. It needs to be what I call a belly breath. Try this. Put your hand on your stomach and take a deep breath. If your hand doesn't move in and out, you're not belly breathing. A simple shoulder is not relaxing, but a breath where it's a belly breath. And they could be snuck in anytime. They work. We can practice talking to ourselves when we feel we're going through stress. We can say to ourselves, hey, wait a minute. I am not going to let this get to me. I'm going to pull this thing off without getting all stressed out. By using these kinds of on-the-spot techniques, we can begin to interrupt that stinking thinking circle. And once you're out of it, try not to slip back into it. What we've been talking about is becoming a smart stress manager, using stress to be more productive on the job and off. But being a good stress manager may also mean managing our lives and our jobs a little differently. For example, we need to pay attention to things like job skills, job competencies. You see, competent people tend to have a lot less stress. And so the better prepared we are, the less stress we have to deal with. And that means some things. Things like keeping abreast of the changes at work, reading those parts and service bulletins, learning the new GM procedures, and attending parts and service training sessions. We can learn how to manage our time as well, and that will allow us to better organize our day and the rest of our life. By improving on these kinds of skills, we begin to give ourselves the impression that we're in control, as opposed to just puppets on a string. We can also learn to plan ahead, set goals for ourselves. It's difficult to have a feeling of control over your life if, on the other hand, you feel like you're just blowing in the wind. Think for yourself. A year from now, what would I like to be doing? 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And we also need to learn how to separate our work from our home. One of the biggest misconceptions about stress is that too much stress is supposed to be bad. Not necessarily. It's really not how much stress we have that's the problem. It's more how long we have it. It's the same day in and day out kinds of stress that has us paying the price. But by learning to segment different parts of our life, we can have a bunch of little stresses instead of just one big one. By separating our work from our home, at least we have a 50-50 chance one of them will work out. Now that means some things. If we're going to successfully separate work from home, it means, number one, that we pay attention to what we do after work and make sure we're not doing the same kinds of things after work as we do at work. Try to make those two worlds as different as you can. Second, we need to cut out the extra work. Yes, I know there are times when things get a little wild and the computer is broken and we have to get the inventory finished and we've got an emergency. But to the extent that's possible, cut it out. Now, one way to ensure that we separate our work from our home is to set up something for ourselves that can be called a bit of a decompression routine. And a decompression routine is a ritual, a ceremony that symbolizes to you the fact that now this part of my day is done, and now I'm going to start this part of my day. It could be anything. You could take a walk, you can read a book, you can read the paper, you can play with the dog, you could go fishing, and once you've finished with this little decompression routine, that's it. It should be a symbol to you and to everybody else around you that now I'm starting the other part of my life. You see, the goal of stress management is not to eliminate stress. We can't, and we shouldn't. The goal is to deal with stress in a way that will use stress to help us become more creative and more productive, on the job and off. Maybe this little stress productivity chart can help us put stress in some kind of perspective. As you can see, this side of the chart measures job performance or productivity, from low performance to high performance. On the bottom is stress, from low stress to high stress. In this corner, you have no stress, but you also have no productivity. Not good. As you begin to move in this direction, however, you begin to pick up stress, but you also begin to pick up job performance. However, at this point, stress begins to go overboard and begins its downward curve. Now, the more stress you add, the less job performance there is, until job performance just falls right off the end of the chart. So you see, the trick is to stay on this side so we can have maximum productivity and maximum performance. I've tried today to teach you to be a better stress manager by learning how to recognize stress, by learning how to prepare yourself for stress, and by learning how to cope with stress when it happens. If you can learn some of the stress management techniques and ideas we've covered here today, you stand a much better chance of dealing with stress and also keeping yourself at peak performance, both here on the job and in the rest of your life.